Welcome to the Average Joe Jiu-Jitsu podcast, episode 16, Karel Pravec. Karel Pravec, commonly known as the Silver Fox, is a Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu black belt of Czechoslovakian descent. Karel was one of the Gracie's first students in the United States and studied under both Renzo Gracie and John Danaher. Karel was awarded his black belt by Renzo Gracie in July of 2006. Karel is also the author of Fluid BJJ and has produced various instructional videos and hosts his Roll with the Fox video series on YouTube each Friday morning at 10:30 a.m. Eastern Time. Karel has recently, Karel has been regularly featured on the Tristar Gym YouTube channel with renowned MMA coach Firas Zahabi. Karel has demonstrated success in his style of focusing on submissions by winning first place in the 2006 10th Grapplers Quest West Masters Lightweight Division, all matches won by submission. First place 2007 Naga World Championship, Advanced Masters Open Weight, all matches won by submission, lightest competitor in the division. Third place 2008 Pan Am Championship No-Gi, Black Belt Adult Lightweights. In first place 2010 European Championships, Black Belt Masters Absolute Division. Karel is recognized as one of the top instructors in the New Jersey area, being behind accomplished competitors such as the 2009 ADCC runner-up Jerry Rinaldi, EBI 12 champion Aaron Blanchfield, mixed martial arts fighters Sergio Dabari, Frank Roberts, Enrique Galarza, and Juan Galarza, and many others. Karel earned his bachelor's degree at the University of Albany and then his master's degree from Columbia University. Karel, thank you for coming on today. I appreciate you being on the podcast.
Oh, it's my pleasure. I always love talking about jiu-jitsu. So,
great. So how you doing today?
Doing excellent. I just got done training in the pool, actually.
Nice. Do you have a pool in your house? In your backyard?
I do, and because of COVID, I usually in the wintertime, like I'm in the summer, I'm an outdoor cat, and in the winter I go indoors. But because last year COVID kicked in, I actually the place where I normally train in the gym didn't open the pool, so I basically kept the pool open all winter. I have a nice solar blanket on it. It was a lot of work, especially when it snows or freezing. You got to constantly watch the temperatures, make sure the pipes don't freeze. But I realized I really like having the place to myself, so I'm going to try to do the same thing this year.
Awesome. Yeah, I'm the same way with my garage and my home gym. I don't work out at gyms anymore. I can't stand it. So you're currently 58 years old, correct?
This is what I tell people.
Okay.
I stopped counting at 50 because it's all in here.
Okay.
I always think of myself as 29 years old until I look in the mirror.
I'm the same way.
I look at a guy and at Renzo's or I'm like, oh man, I got to help this guy. He looks kind of older. He might have a hard time. Turns out the guy's like 44 years old. And I don't think of myself as older than him. I think of myself as younger than him. And then I look in the mirror, I'm like, oh crap.
Exactly. I'm 50 and I just turned 50 this year. And I'm the same way. Like if I don't look in the mirror or look at a picture of myself, I'm like, I still feel like I'm in my 20s, but then I see the reality and it's a mixed bag. So you actually moved to the U.S. from Czechoslovakia when you were 17.
Correct. One day, like literally the day after we arrived, I turned 17. Yeah.
Wow. So like my mom will always tell me, because she had to change high school senior year, and she says it was devastating for her. But I can imagine it must have been pretty hard for you to finish high school in the U.S. and also assimilate to a new culture. What was that experience like?
I think, a lot of things is, first of all, where there's a will, there's a way. That's one of my favorite sayings. And, it's also expectations. If you expect that it's going to be, it's going to be an adjustment and then you're going to have to work hard. And, I went 1 year in high school here. I literally, it was a big high school in the Bronx it was weird because I wind up, the New York State has Regents exams, so there are statewide exams to make sure that people meet sort of certain minimum standards and so forth. I got the highest score in American Studies, and I was literally here 3 months. So wow. Kind of showed you, I guess, if you study, you train hard, you go to class and everything, anything's possible. So. anyways, to me, I didn't consider it that hard. And I actually worked at night in a milk packing plant. So, anyways, it was not, yeah, it was not hard.
It was not hard for you. That's great.
At least the way I look at it back.
No,
Might have been hard back then, but looking back on it, wasn't.
I could tell you're a very successful person in everything you do, it seems like. So I'm not actually surprised. I just thought I'd ask.
Thank you.
But, so, and some people may not know, you're actually a third-degree black belt in Taekwondo as well. You actually started in Taekwondo. Was that the first martial you did?
It was. I always enjoyed like sort of the Bruce Lee movies, the Kung Fu movies. And at one point I said, okay, I got to do this. And, I started training Taekwondo, and my teacher is a real nice guy, but he kind of, was kind of around the time I got my black belt, he was not interested in teaching so much. And I wind up teaching a lot of classes, and there was a bunch of guys, the more senior students, that we started to train on our own kind of with each other. And we wound up going to a lot of different seminars, Muay Thai seminars. And back in the day, seminars were more like camps. They were like weekend long events.
Yeah.
And we wind up going to, Bill Superfoot Wallace seminar, Joe Lewis, Wallet J, Small Circle Jiu-Jitsu. I even went to George Dillman, the
death touch guy, Death mock.
So we just didn't know, and we just tried to experiment with a lot of different things. And then one of my friends, Craig Panzano, he was a brown belt at the time, I was a black belt. He and I he was a tough guy. He and I used to train a lot together, and he gave me the Gracie's in Action tape. And he said, "Hey, Carl, these guys are coming to New Jersey." That was like a first East Coast seminar, I believe they did in 1991 in Sheraton Parsippany. And he said, "Check out the tape," and they're coming here for the weekend. As I said, "All right, let's go." So we did the seminar. It was a weekend long thing. Everybody was there. Hickson, Hoyler, Helio was there. Horian. It just like there was like 8 guys, and 10 kids that just came, and it was on carpet. There was no mats, and we basically wound up training afterwards. And there was a lot of East Coast, big names like Steve Maxwell, and I can't remember all the names there. And next year they did again, but this time they start to splinter, the word started to spread. At that time, I think it was kind of a lot of the students were martial artists in other styles. And in 92 they did a seminar in the city, but it was there was fewer black belts, and fewer people attended. I attended that one, but at that time there was no formal way to train in New Jersey. Just basically just go to the seminar, incorporate whatever you can into your regular training. So that's kind of how the whole thing started.
So yeah, you didn't start actually training consistently until 93, but you actually started training with Craig Kukuk, who's the first American black belt in Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu. Is that correct?
Correct. What wound up happening, at that time, training consistently was training once or twice a week. Right. Because back then it was, Horian Gracie sent Craig Kukuk, who was the first American black belt, but not a lot of people know about him, to New Jersey to teach because there was a lot of demand. So actually, he was based in New Jersey, but he taught in New Jersey, in New York City, and Philly. Basically, you would train once or twice a week. I would train, first in New Jersey, then I would actually train in New Jersey and in the city. And, started to, at that time, I was still mostly committed to training stand-up. I just wanted to kind of, what would happen if I went to the ground? And
Right.
Eventually, I think 94, he teamed up with Renzo to do the tapes because he needed he wanted the Gracie name. And Renzo came up to New Jersey, I believe it was 94. And I think he started coming up, to shoot the videos and then teach some classes, do some privates, and go back to Brazil. I believe in 95, could have been early 96, he moved in permanently because they opened up a school. They partnered up with each other. They had Craig had a falling out with Horian first, then eventually when Renzo was here, he had a falling out with Renzo and wind up just moving away to Idaho. And I've been with Renzo ever since. So that's sort of how but even in the sort of in the early days, I was training once or twice a week, then sort of 2 or 3 times a week. And I was still primarily focused on stand-up. It was not till probably till later 90s that I started to focus more on Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu, and then really became, most focused on it, and going forward. So that's sort of how my progression in Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu was.
Right. So the striking, but you kept the striking in at some point, because you did some MMA work as well with competitors. So
yeah,
you still do striking work now?
A little bit, mostly in the pool. I just at the end of the day, striking for MMA has to be hybridized, because any type of striking art you do, whether it's boxing, whether it's Taekwondo, whether it's karate, whether it's Muay Thai, it needs to be hybridized for MMA, because you have the possible threat of takedown and submissions. Just like Jiu-Jitsu has to be kind of adjusted for MMA, just because you got the pounding, ground and pound, so forth. Right. And wrestling has to be, because again, you have the threat of submissions. So I still do a little bit of that, but my passion is Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu. That I've been almost solely focused on Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu probably for the last at least 20 years, and but I think I've made more progress in Jiu-Jitsu probably since I got my black belt than prior to getting my black belt. I've been black belt longer than I have been up to the black belt, but it's I guess 13 and then 15 years, but I've gotten probably 3 times as good at since getting my black belt, probably in the leading up to the black belt. That's if I could, I'm not, it's just pulling out of my head, but
no, it makes sense. It makes sense. But I was going to ask you though, do you think that there was some psychological thing behind that fact, or is it just time in? I mean, what I'm saying is that once you got your black belt, you stop worrying about that kind of stuff. You just trained.
There's just several factors. I think for me, I'm very harsh on myself. So I had a very, very hard time early days, where, if I had a rough day, I would just literally verbally kick my own ass going home.
I know that person. I know that guy very well. Yeah.
And I talk to my students now not to repeat the same mistake I made. So mentally, you put yourself in a dark place. That was one of them. Second, I really, I saw it in the early days already as more of a chess match than sort of a physical combat. And, when you have that mindset, especially in the early days when it was much more physical, it was much more, most of the guys, are still not that skilled. There's a lot of white blue belts in the early days, not so many higher level belts. And, it was more of a grind, and you're going to get your ass kicked a lot, until at some point you accumulate enough in your toolbox, enough skill that now you can actually start to use that sort of more of a technical game versus a more athletic game. Would that make sense? So I had a hard time the first 10 years in this, until I became start to get good, and that's when things start to click, and when I had a better mindset, and then you could start. I think mindset is a very important thing in Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu, and in all combat sports, in all sports. And I don't consider this a sport. I consider it a martial art, first and foremost. But I try to now talk to my students so they don't get the same view. And because I think you can have an easier path and probably more productive path if you adopt that mindset a little bit earlier.
Right. Yeah. I've been trying to do that myself, and actually I heard you say it in another interview, right? And I tried to start doing that, because I'm not as bad as I was before, but I still do tend to beat myself up. I will get on my own case. I'm my worst, critic. How did you still feel like that when you were a purple belt, or it started?
Yes.
Okay.
It started to lead me when I, a little bit after I got my brown belt, I started to develop like some weapons that I use to this day that are highly effective back then, and even more effective now. And, I just want to point out, like, my game is better than it was 3 years and constantly evolves. I'm constantly adding things, fine tuning things now that, you know, I made some videos and a book 5 years ago, and people like, well, I bought your video back then. Is your video different now? Well, that video might've had, you know, an hour devoted to this subject. This one that I just did for BJJ Fanatics has 3. So it's a lot more comprehensive, number one, but also my game has evolved in the last 3 years. And first of all, I've become a better practitioner, but I also became a better teacher, both in person and on camera. But yes, it started to lead me, you know, I started to develop my guillotine, a lot of my udegatame, upside down arm bars, attacks, and a lot of my inverted triangles, even though I was playing with some of that stuff even back when I was a blue belt. So I think, you know, that's when it started to, it became more productive. There's still times, like, for example, I have you know, one of my specialties, like I hit this on a lot of high level guys, you know, where I go for an arm bar, they pull out the arm, they wind up in a reverse triangle, and then I attack the arm. That's probably one of my most consistent sort of finishes. And even like high level wrestlers, bigger guys, way bigger, way stronger, could not escape, but Nicky Rod could. And it just bothered the hell out of me for a whole afternoon until I got to my academy, and I had an idea. And basically what I tried to do is fight his counter instead of going with it. And as soon as I figured it out, it was the same day. It was like, okay, everything is right in the world again, you know. There you go. So I did figure it out. And then I following week when I saw him at Renzo, I was like, Nicky, can I try this? And he's like, yeah, no problem. And it worked. So there you go. So I tried to take a more productive approach. I think that the approach needs to be not like, you know, you suck, you know, well, what was this? Like, how can it's more to what is the problem and what could be the possible solution. If you don't know the answer, ask the people that might have the answer. Look it up on YouTube, like specific, it becomes, if you have a problem solving attitude towards your mistakes or your failings or your what you got caught with, it becomes a better path. It becomes a more productive, more enjoyable path. So if I can impart that, adopt the problem-solving attitude.
That's excellent. Yeah, I agree. And I think it's important too, when you're trying new things, remember that you're trying something new and that you don't suck. You just suck at that thing because you haven't really mastered how to do it yet. So you may not be that successful at first. You have to be easy on yourself. Like I love the Musashi saying, it may seem difficult at first, but everything is difficult at first.
Yeah, that's true.
Yeah,
I try to tell my new students is like, listen, like you looking around like you think you're not embarrassed because you can't do it. Guess what? Everybody else in this room couldn't do it the first day.
Right.
You know?
Exactly. So you started teaching out of your garage after receiving your black belt in 2006. And how many people were you teaching in your garage at that point?
I really wasn't teaching. Just
training?
At the time, at the time I was still doing corporate finance. I actually started teaching, you know, when I was when I got my purple and brown. That was formally teaching. I just basically, you know, at the time I was doing corporate finance, so I had a hard time, you know, getting to class on a consistent basis. You know, at the time I still was doing stand up maybe once or twice a week, sometimes even 3. But I wanted to train, you know, maybe 4 or 5 times a week jiu-jitsu, and I couldn't make it to class maybe 2 or 3 times a week. So to bridge that gap, I basically, because at that time, even, you know, purple belts that could walk on water. So I had guys that would be interested in training with me at 6 to 7 a.m. in my basement, because at the time there were, you know, blue belts. So for me, it was a training partner, and I would help him get better in jiu-jitsu.
Right.
And I had a guy that would suck it up and get up in, you know, 5:30 in the morning and train 6 to 7, 7:15, and then take a shower and head into the city. So that's when I started to kind of like, not formally teaching, but more just kind of be almost like a help guys that are junior to me to get better in jiu-jitsu in return for them to provide their body to me at 6 to 7 a.m. And then, you know, in 2006, you know, one of the guys, I think he was a blue belt at the time, he talked me into subleasing a karate school from him to, you know, to start teaching.
Nice. Well, but even the training in your garage, I would think that helps your development too. Just having that body there and helping them out. Did you feel
It
like
does. It does. It does. However, you wind up. Here's the thing: if you go to class, you wind up with different training partners, so different body types, different games. One, also, you're forced to work on stuff outside that's most comfortable to you, because the teacher chooses a topic.
Right.
Now that a lot of times I'm training on my own, I have, like, I could show you on my phone. There is stuff that I sometimes do and I film for myself. Let me see if I can. So I have videos like up the yin yang on my phone of things that I play around with. Sometimes I think about it in the water. I try it in the water without a drilling partner. It might make sense to me. I try it on one of my guys, and then if it works, I go back to it in the water and start drilling it to make sure it becomes part of my game. Or sometimes I will come up with something like on one of my guys, it just intuitively comes to me now, and the intuition is rewired. I didn't have that intuition 20 years ago, 25 years ago. I have it now because I focus so much on BJJ, and I hit him with something. I'm like, let me try that again. Let me try that again. And then I play with it in the water. So you need to have actually a mentality of trying to broaden your game, as opposed to just, back in that day, it's good, but it's not as good as going to class, because I was, at some point, like, especially, if you get home from work, because I had a fairly demanding job, 10 o'clock, 11 o'clock at night, and then waking up at 6 a.m. and training, you become on autopilot. And sometimes it's not as productive as you would be. It's better than nothing, for sure. But it's better to go to class, or at least have a plan, have a training plan. What am I going to try to do better today? What am I going to try to work on today? Right.
Well, that makes a lot of sense. So then you subleased. You subleased the karate school.
The karate school, 3 days a week. I started teaching formally. Yeah.
Okay. And I mean, how long did you? And I'm sure you didn't retire right or stop your corporate job right away. But how long did it take before you got to that point?
Roughly 4 years, 3 or 4 years. And I went from 3 days, then I subleased, because I could only have it 3 days a week. I subleased another actually a fitness gym. I never refer to my school as a gym. It's always an academy or school, because I think people, refer to it as a gym. It's not a gym. As far as, in my mind, when you come to my academy, I try to teach you world-class jiu-jitsu, and I, obviously try to make you a decent human being. But in a gym, it's basically come in, you lift, and nobody pays attention, and you go home. So I actually subleased another 3 days in a fitness gym that was about 2 miles. So it's, so I wound up subleasing 3 and 3. So I had 6 days a week. The problem was, like, a new guy is like, hey, by the way, we're over here. So as the school grew, I kind of just had to make a choice. It's like, it just became a fairly big undertaking. And I was like, okay, I got to make a decision. I can either continue. This is, to do it on the side, it didn't necessarily do it justice, because I wanted to grow it more, or choose the other one. So I chose to do this.
No, that's excellent. It's excellent. And I actually have a lot of respect for the fact that you treat it as a martial art first and a sport second, and your feelings on academy versus gym. I feel the same way. I like that a lot. I immediately, when I got into Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu, I got into it as a martial art. I'd done martial arts most of my life, and that was my focus, was just martial arts. I have competed, but that wasn't my primary focus when I got into it. So one thing that really impressed me was your competition background. And so what I found out was, although highly successful as a coach instructor, you did not compete yourself until you became a black belt.
Yeah, that's a mistake.
Okay, it is a mistake. Okay.
Yeah, it is a mistake, because, think about it this way. You compete with other white belts or other blue belts. They, they lack competition experience. So now, it becomes, that winning or losing in competition, and there's probably 5-7 major factors. It's obviously it's your skill and techniques is one, your conditioning, your whether you use the right strategy, are you playing to the rule set, are you doing weight cutting? There's a slew of things, and not necessarily the better technical guy does not always win. But when you compete against other white or blue belts that might have similar or no competition experience, you remove that experience factor from the equation.
Right.
So when I start competing, I'm going in the field where, you got guys like, competing Cabrini a couple times at his peak, guys like Jeff Glover, guys that have been competing since, and I only have my skill, my technique versus, you remove, I didn't have any competition. First of all, I didn't compete. I only competed maybe twice a year versus, to be really successful in competition, you really need to compete at a minimum 8 to 15 times a year. That's one. Right. And it's good to have the competition experience from earlier belts, because that's, having an understanding of the of the rule set, how do you compete with that rule set. I like in 2007, I'm in the Nogi Worlds, in the adult black belt division. And I'm going against a guy, his father is a 6th-degree black belt from Brazil. He's a Brazilian guy. He takes me down, and I put him into an inverted triangle off the takedown. And I'm trying to basically, my mindset is it's a 10-minute match. And my mindset is to finish him. And basically, he was grabbing his own shorts and he was grabbing my shorts to the point where like he couldn't escape. Like if you look at the Nogi Worlds 2007 trailer, there's me walking away with shredded rash guard. He put his foot through the rash guard because he couldn't escape. But in my mind, I never thought about points. And basically, I'm trying to either take the Kimura or finish the inverted triangle. I didn't have a perfect angle in the inverted triangle, so the Kimura it was. And like I said, he couldn't escape, so I'm going to like this to the referee. He's like, he's grabbing his own shorts. He's grabbing my shorts. And long story short, I lost on the points on the takedown. And afterwards, his father, the referee, his trainer, and this guy all came to me and said, you know what? Off the takedown, if you just basically put your hand, if you just like adjusted where you were, and I don't know exactly how basically they told me I would have gotten 3 points for getting past his guard and getting 3 points to 2. It never even entered my mind.
Right.
That these 4 guys told me, like, if I understood the rules better, I would have been maybe like when he was taking me down, my foot got caught. Foot got caught in that he was still in my guard, and I would have I got past his guard or something. But they told me, all 3 of them told me that I could have gotten 3 points if I just forgot about the submission and just changed my hands from the Kimura to put him on top of side control. Because he was on his side, and it was just. But anyways, long story short, it never entered my mind. I was just submission only. So you have no experience. That was probably after the Grapplers Quest West. That was probably my second tournament ever. So. If people are interested in competing, I'd recommend that they start doing it early. Don't. Yeah. I tell people, do as I say, not as I do.
Right.
Or as I did.
Right. Yeah. I mean, it's iffy with me. I'm like I said, I'm 50, and I competed as a white and blue belt a lot, and then or pretty good amount, not a lot, but a pretty good amount. And then purple, I haven't because of the pandemic. I tried to before the pandemic, and it was always like issues trying to get a bracket at my age level and rank. And then the pandemic hit. And actually I was signed up for a tournament, finally had a bracket when the shutdown began, and they canceled the tournament. And so it didn't happen. And then now I'm sort of waiting to see what happens with the pandemic before I really want to jump into a huge crowd of people like that again. But I'd like to compete again. I feel like I need to do that again, just for my own personal experience. I don't think I really want to do it all the time. It's not a huge focus of mine, but I think it's still important to do it at least a couple times a year or something.
Yeah, to be honest with you, I don't advocate competition. I think it's just never another level of intensity.
Mhm.
I don't think it tells you anything about your game. People say, well, if you don't compete, you really couldn't defend yourself. I think that's full of crap, because
Yeah, I do too.
the reality is a lot of people psych themselves out before competition. It's
Mhm.
the nerves come in. Whereas if you're in a self-defense scenario, it's just go time. It's just like
Mhm.
immediate. It's usually, there is no nerves. It's just like you react. So the only reason I did it is because I was scared of it, and that's the only reason I did it.
No, in the same way, that's the only reason I think of keeping, continuing to do it a little bit, is that it makes me nervous. I don't like it. I just really don't enjoy it. The whole
yeah.
thing. The whole thing to me, I don't want to enjoy it.
But it's just another aspect of, for me right now, people still like, hey, Fox, are you going to compete? I'm like, man, like right now, my game is better than it was 5 years ago.
Mhm.
And 5 years ago is better than it was 10, and 5 years before that.
Mhm.
The problem is, I focused on making my game better,
Mhm.
being a great teacher,
Mhm.
and running the school. If I add competition, especially if you do it right, to do it at least 8 to 10 times a year,
Mhm.
something has to take a back seat. And that's, one of those three things are extremely important. So I think it's just, you can't focus on too many major things at the same time.
No, I agree. I don't think I was having this discussion with somebody the other day, and he said the same thing, where you cannot be a really successful jiu-jitsu competitor at a high level and run a school successfully. It's sort of like you have to be sort of selfish when you do that.
Yeah.
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 And so I absolutely agree with that. Yeah, I do. I mean, and I also think that, and I've even experienced that this year, like where I changed academies this year. So that was, a new situation going in, and with a whole bunch of people I didn't know, and it did okay. And we're going to large open mats where you're training with a lot of people you don't know. It's semi close to a tournament type thing as far as the nerves or whatever, or the unpredictability of what's going to happen. And it's a cool little test of what you can do, but at the same time, it's not as emotionally charged as a competition, or not.
Yeah.
It's not out for blood, kind of thing.
I've seen plenty of people that, technically better than the other guy and just lose.
Yeah.
That's just the nature of like I said, there's at least 5 to 7 major factors that determine, who's going to be a winner, and technique, is just one of them.
Mine was always confidence. That was the biggest one. If I was confident, I would do fine. I would usually win I won by submission, or I'd win by points, obviously. But like my last blue belt tournament, I didn't make weight, and I had to run around for 45 minutes upstairs trying to make weight. And I finally made weight on my third time, and I got downstairs and I went right into my first match right after that. I mean, like within minutes, and I got belly down armbarred, and I was like, crap. So I had to tap. Then I had a second match against somebody else who I actually competed against and won as a white belt. And I actually submitted him with a triangle in that second match. And my coach said to me, he looked at me. The only thing he said when I got up was like, he said, "See, you just got to be confident." He walked away from me. See, so it's really what it is. And I listened to him, and he was right. And that's really what it is. His confidence was a big thing for me. But that's just something I need to work on within myself. So I've watched a lot of your Roll with the Fox videos on YouTube. They're excellent. I will sit there and binge watch them. And I wish I could actually participate in the live discussion, but I'm actually training at that time because it's 7:30 on the West Coast, so I'm actually in class in the morning. Yeah. But I'll always go back and watch them on YouTube, and they're great. And by the way, the beginnings are really good. The comedic value, especially episode 69. Episode 69 made me crack up. So.
I forgot about that one. I forgot about that one.
You, Enrique, and North South. Episode 69.
Yeah. I forgot about that one. We tried to have fun with it. That's one thing, guys. Try to have fun with this, because if you enjoy it, it's going to be a lot easier path.
Oh, it is. Absolutely. I have to have fun, or it's just like, it's not fun. And why would you want to do it? You know what I mean? Exactly. That's my thing. Is I just want to have fun with it too. But I enjoy how you compared applications of various concepts of sport jiu-jitsu versus MMA / self-defense.
Yeah.
What are your views on, so I want to see, what were your views on jiu-jitsu self-defense, i.e. Gracie self-defense? Coming from your lineage, was that part of your curriculum? What was your opinion of it? If you did.
Oh, it's great. I think what a lot of people use it for marketing reasons now, that like, oh, it's different, it's not sports. Let me tell you something. Somebody like Ryan Hall, who I respect greatly, and look, he's fighting at the highest level of MMA. But when he was competing in jiu-jitsu or grappling, and I believe he took third in ADCC 2009 too. But he would triangle people and he'll hook people. People do, it's just they or Gianni Grippo, a lot of times he pulls guard and goes inverted or does berimbolo. You don't think that guy could double leg somebody?
Absolutely.
And get on top of it.
Yeah.
Ryan Hall was in an altercation and he double legged the guy back even before he started doing MMA. They know how to do it. The only reason why they pull guard or do berimbolo or invert is because this is how they best perform under that rule set. They know how to double leg people and get on top and mount, and they know it. To me, to a large extent, it's BS. What I do believe is that some people that don't have that, like they just never developed the other skill sets, that they believe, that I always think that Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu is a martial art first and foremost, and should be, is one of the. This is what drew me to it is it was a very effective tool for anybody in a self-defense scenario, and you can't forget about striking from the like, listen, you can have the guy in your guard, you can hit him from the bottom, but in the early days, this back in the early days, probably 93, 94, 95, we had this before it was called even MMA, it was called Vale Tudo or an HP, no holds barred. Basically the bottom guy would get a headgear, and the top guy would get gloves. He starts in your guard and starts punching down, and your guard is going to get good very, very fast, and you will never forget that if you're on the bottom and you play stupid guard, you can get hit, and you should pay attention to that. If you that this is the guard you're going to play, that's fine. But also you should develop at least, not rudimentary. To me, rudimentary is fairly but you should have, you should have some skills to be able to get on top. And most of those guys actually do. It's just, they like, oh, look at his matches. Well, that's not his complete game. I'm pretty sure he knows how to double leg you, take you down, and take care of themselves in a self-defense scenario. So,
okay, great. So you stated in, here's another question for us, our group of people. So as we get older, things don't quite work as well as they used to. Are there any areas that give you more trouble than others? And what do you do to address those issues, or how do you adjust your training to accommodate them?
Wind, condition, I mean, there's a couple of reasons for it. Age is one of them, but you can compensate with conditioning. The other thing is, when I train in the water, I usually, when I engage the technique, when I start the technique, what you got to do is the most difficult part about it is to breathe out before you start the sequence. And then once I go, because you need to engage gravity to some extent, and then I do the sequence, I usually go to finish, which means you hold your breath, and there's additional pressure for me to finish a submission in a very efficient way, because I hate to break the sequence in mid-sequence and come up for air. So that's one of the reasons why my sequences are so efficient, because I got to be able to finish something very quickly and go into submission. And a third one, I just found out recently, I had back problems since I was a kid, but periodically they go from bad to really, really bad. And they've been really bad since May this year. So I've been, I had an epidural a few months ago, didn't work. So fortunately I can train and teach, but I'm doing a lot more water training than I did before, because it helps alleviate the pressure on the spine. Sometimes I just walk up 3 steps and my legs fall down, or if I'm sitting around too long, my legs go down when I stand up. I digress a little bit. My point is that I just found out during this process that I was, trying to, that the guy, the therapist is like, hey, do you have, basically my lower spinal is like Jenga, So the therapist is like, hey, do you get gassed? I said, what are you training? I said, yeah, well, I'm training with, black belt studs, in their 20s and 30s. And he said, well, there's another reason, because apparently my back is so messed up that your diaphragm is primarily used for breathing.
Right.
So, but apparently my diaphragm has, a side job, which is now to keep the structure of my back, the Jenga, kind of keep it in a way, that it doesn't kind of get worse or collapse while I'm training. So I have to rely on diaphragm for breathing and keeping the structure of my back intact when I'm training. So that's the one part that I don't know how to address. I could do more conditioning, but if I do more conditioning, that's going to come expense of my jiu-jitsu training. So at this point, I'm not willing to make that leap. But fortunately, I'm pretty, like, if I train with the younger guys, like my younger black belts, I will start getting tired maybe 20, 30 minutes into the training. So, that's pretty good. At that point, I either suck it up and try to keep going. It's easier when if I was training on the mats, 4 or 5 times a week. Now I'm training on the mats maybe 2 or 3 times a week, teach 5 days a week, and then train in the water the other 4 or 5 times a week. So training in the water makes my game better, but it doesn't necessarily contribute to conditioning. If I swap the water training with addition, 2 or 3 days on the mat training versus water, my conditioning would be better. So right now I'm in a kind of a holding pattern. So I focus on improving my game as opposed to the conditioning aspect.
Okay. And your definition of conditioning, you basically just use jiu-jitsu for conditioning as far as like live rolling.
Correct. Correct. Correct.
So you don't do any type of outside conditioning, weight training, any of that kind of stuff. Okay. All right.
I just lift heavy guys.
Yeah. Heavy guys. Yeah. Lift heavy bodies. No, you're in great shape. I mean, it's like, I wanted to ask you too about your diet, because you're really lean. I mean,
I don't ask me about my diet.
Okay. All right.
I'm like a bear. I eat anything. I drink, pretty much anything.
It's a seafood diet, right? The seafood you eat.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. I like, especially if my back is jacked. I like, 2 beers out, after it starts to relax the muscles, so it doesn't seize up and make it worse. But I'm not a go-to guy for diet, guys.
I actually like beer too. I like IPAs, and I'll have a couple.
Yeah, me too.
And I actually find they help my allergies. The histamine in the alcohol.
Oh yeah,
it helps relieve my allergies, because
all right. Here's another good reason. Yeah. The allergy season is upon us here in New Jersey, and actually, I think because I'm in the water right now, the chlorine makes my nose a little irritated, so that doesn't help. But okay. All right, more IPA it is.
There you go. Yeah, I have allergies, so many allergies to outside environmentals that I'm getting stimulated 12 months out of the year where I live. It's different stuff that blooms at different times. So it's just more excuse to drink my IPA. So you stated in your video, there was a video you have on your website, which by the way is an excellent website. It has all of your videos on it, all of the information that we've talked about.
Thank you, Ronin.com, to do a shout out. Ronin.com. But they did a really good job.
Great website. And there is a video on there in the Fluid BJJ section at the bottom of the homepage, and you're speaking the background. There's some video of you rolling with somebody in the cage, but you said the following about Fluid BJJ. It's not about drilling movement in combinations in the water to perfect muscle memory, visualization, and improve our technique, but also the idea of how to attack your opponent by taking advantage of their defense against your attacks to wind up in a very efficient and smooth submission. So I think, in my opinion, of what I've seen and trying to follow you and trying to learn so many of your game and also your background with like Renzo and John Danaher, you must believe in a systemized approach to BJJ. Is that accurate? Or you seem to have an answer. It's like you seem to have an answer for every direction your opponent may go. but your submissions seem to revolve around specific variations of arm bars, triangles, front and inverted guillotines, arm in and arm out, and rear naked chokes, at least for no gi.
Yes, yes, and no.
Okay.
So yes, I think a system helps, but a system, there's a lot of different systems for BJJ. This is where the art portion of martial art comes in. I don't want BJJ to ever get in the Olympics because I think that's going to make the rule set so rigid, and that's where everybody's going to start to gravitate towards, and it's going to really sort of start to take away individualistic approaches to the style. There's also a different instructional style that appeals to different people. So yes, systems are good, but also a lot of times it's not, okay, here's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. There sometimes has to be like, okay, 1, and then I go to B. So combat is unpredictable. So I think systems help us learn because it becomes a more predictable way to pick up the knowledge, but also it can be limiting. And I think, it's once you sort of start to get to higher levels, you probably need to focus on sort of whether it's systems, when people refer to systems, it's almost like this is the holy grail. It's black and white. It's not black and white. It's gray.
Right.
Guys, life is gray. BJJ is gray. Combat is gray. So when you become too black and white, you become too rigid, and you stop to be open to other ideas. Like I was training in the pool today, and I'm just coming up with stuff that I started playing with. This back step from a seat, as a counter, I'm standing and the guy is in seated guard. I'm starting to play with this where it's an arm and a leg involvement. It's sort of like, if you think about it, it's like, the buggy chokes, the mouse traps, and all these other things there. It's an arm and a leg combination versus just legs, just arms. And I'm starting to come up with things in these, as soon as we're done, I'm in Butler, Silver Fox BJJ Butler right now. And when my guy comes in, I thought about it in the water. I think it works. As soon as we're done and he comes in, I'm going to say, hey, Enrique, let me see this, if this works. So the point is, yes, what I tried to do is on the BJJ Fanatics, I have 4 videos out now. I tried to systemize those things. I didn't learn them as a system. I started to learn them, and then I start to learn counters to their counters and improvements and follow-up submissions as people. So I didn't learn it this way. I start to learn it intuitively as people react and as it comes to my head. But I systemized it for the people buying the DVD, or it's not a DVD, it's download, the instructional or seminars, because it's an easier way for them to learn. So it's yes, I am a big believer in it as a teacher. And as a teacher, both online stuff as well as in seminars, as well as my classes. But as far as for my own game development, I try to pick up stuff incrementally.
Okay. So would it be safe to say that I'm thinking for myself at this point, because as the purple belt, right? Would it be safe to say that learning the system to get the information is a quicker way to get the information, but then after you've assimilated what you feel like works, then you can let go of the other things that don't necessarily jive with you or connect with you, and then develop your own system from there?
Yeah, develop your own approach. I believe so, because I think it's a very simple idea. It's like, to me, purple belt is the biggest belt in BJJ, by the way. To me, it's like, when you get to purple belt, most people will, there's at least 50% chance you're going to make it to black belt and past that. So until then, it's a bit of a crapshoot. But, at purple belt, you have a fair amount of knowledge, and either you scrap that knowledge because you believe it's not good, or you start to add incremental. By then, also, people start to develop a game that's suited well for their personality, for their body type, for their size, athleticism, and so forth. So you've already developed some. So you need to try to mimic, I think, the guys' games and the styles that are well suited for your for your game, I think. And as well, rather than, oh, this is the world's most renowned teacher, let me take this as gospel.
Right.
That guy, I guarantee you there will be things. And I like, listen, I have watched, 10-minute matches or 20-minute matches, which are like watching paint dry for a 3 seconds. Yeah.
Right. Yeah.
For a 3-second scramble, that's going to give me an idea. Oh shit, I just saw something there. I'm going to play with something along those lines. So now, but I've been training for a long time. So for me, that's how I, evolve my game. So I think people up until, if you're a white belt, you're a blank slate. If you're a blue belt, you kind of have some things. You may need to pay attention to your body type, athleticism, personality, what kind of game you want to develop. But even a guy that may not necessarily be well suited for that, I guarantee you're going to pick up, with a good teacher, you're going to pick up 3 to 10 things that make sense for your game. You just need to be a little bit more strategic about it. For me, if like somebody spends $100 for a seminar, $100 on an instructional, and if you can pick up 3 to 5 good things, you got your money's worth.
Oh, yeah, I agree.
Those things are going to pay you dividends for years to come. Whereas people kind of just try to like, everything makes sense to me, and if it doesn't, I'm not. This isn't. Wow. Yeah. Right. Well, then maybe that's your approach, but I've been in this a long time, so my approach is slightly different.
No, I agree. I think that's a good way to say it. That's an excellent way to say it. And yeah, I think I do have people that I have preferences as far as people I like to follow for instructionals and so forth. I always really liked Ryan Hall. I like Bernardo Fiaria. I like his passing style, like Guy for Guy and so forth. I understand. I get what you're saying, and I do that reinforces what I was already thinking. So that's great to hear. So what about training methods? Do you what's your favorite way to train depending on what's going on? Like, do you prefer free rolling, drilling, flow rolling, or situational sparring, or all of them?
My favorite is rolling or flow rolling.
Okay.
But when we flow roll, we try to focus on precision. Those are my 2 favorite ways to train. The reality is, I think most people need a weekly almost schedule of training, because, if if you're a heavy duty competitor and you want to train 7 days a week, you may not want to be banging heads, go full bore 7 days a week. Maybe you roll heavy 5 days a week, and 2 days is kind of drilling. Drilling is underrated. I'm the first one to admit it, that, I should do more drilling, and I do some drilling, but I should do more. And drill 2 days and flow roll, because flow roll is somewhere intermediate step between drilling and full bore live rolling. It allows you to kind of polish the stuff that you kind of pick up through drilling. So those are my 2 favorite, but you need to kind of have almost a weekly schedule. If you're a guy that, has a family, has a full-time job, and, you have kind of a couple of kids that you're going to need to go to soccer games and all that, maybe the thing for you to do is aim for, maybe in the early days, start 2 to 3 days a week, and then eventually work up to 4, but maybe 2 or 3 is going to be, full rolling, and then 1 or 2 going to be more focused on drilling, flow rolling. So you can, because if you're going to be banging heads, and go fully bore alive 4 days a week, you may, with all the other responsibilities you got, maybe, you got a demanding job where you don't get a lot of sleep, the body starts to break down. And a lot of times, I'm also a fan of, your body needs to feel a little bit of that fatigue, because usually when your body feels good and everything is healthy, that's the guys that train twice a week,
right?
3 times a week, because basically there's always enough time between the 2 days. They feel fully like, let's go. Guess what? That guy may not be in that situation, but also, you play a more physical game and less technical than you should be, because you are just healthy. And you aim for that when you're in a tournament, in a fight. That's what you aim for. And that's not necessarily the best way to, if your number 1 goal is skill acquisition, that may not be the best way.
Okay. All right. Yeah. I really do like the flow roll. I actually got a chance to do it with a black belt last week, and it felt really good just to move and just continually, go back and forth. It was
So you
nice.
got to see things. Listen,
Yeah.
I've had roles with guys. I remember this, like it was yesterday. He was a high level blue belt at Renzo's, very athletic, like built like a, and the guy just went batshit crazy on me. I subbed him 3 times in a rapid succession, and then he cut me.
Oh yeah, I remember this story. Yeah, go ahead.
And I was bleeding profusely to the point where I couldn't continue. And like when I finally stopped the bleeding, I went to him and said, "Can you name one of the 3 submissions I hit you with?" He couldn't name one. So basically, we were in a fight because if you're that out of it mentally that you do not know what you got nailed with, how is that a learning experience to you? Like, because you cannot even, you didn't even. You had no concept of what you got hit. How did you get there?
Right.
How would you not get there the next time? How would you possibly defend the next time?
Right.
So, Bernardo Faria, that, great guy as well. He actually said it, you better off training 100% all the time at 80% of the time than training 3 months at 110 and then be out for 6 months.
Exactly. That makes a lot of sense too. Yeah. Yeah. I remember hearing that story before. I think it was on Mental Models BJJ podcast. I think I heard that story. You told that, and that's amazing that people. I guess there's just those people out there that just like black out when they roll, and they just go like charging bulls. And
at a high level, he got a purple belt a few months later. I mean, at that point, you should know better.
Yeah, you should. You should.
Like, listen, you go after me, I go after you. Yeah. It's very simple.
It's like, what are you trying to prove? What are you trying to do? So that makes a lot of sense. I'm gonna try to get more flow rolling into my training. I'd like to do that. I've done situational. We always do situational, that kind of stuff. But I'd like to do some more flow rolling. I really did enjoy it.
I think it's good, but you need to have at least 1 or 2 days a week rolling, because if you flow roll for 3 months, you're not gonna be sharp, because when that intensity suddenly goes up, you're not used to it. So you gotta constantly hone your body and your mind with different training methods, and flow rolling is one of them. Yeah,
I try to do like real rolling 2 to 3 times a week.
Perfect.
That's what I do, because if I do any more than that, I'm just crushed.
Yeah.
I try to train 5 to 6 days a week. So
perfect.
Yeah, that's what I try. So in your opinion, if you had to pick 3 concepts practitioners could focus on to develop an effective guard passing as quickly as possible, what would you think they'd be?
Okay, so what I would do is first is focus, which one are you better off? Sort of tight passing or standing more loose passing. Okay. Now, then whichever one you focus on, make sure you have at least 1 or 2 of the other kind, because you have to switch it up. That's one. Okay. 2, develop if you're developing one side, most people are better passing to their left. You're not going to be as good passing to your right, but you have to at least have some basic knowledge, because you may need to switch it up. Okay. Now, what I usually do is when I'm passing, I prefer looser standing passes to tight passes, because it's just look at my physicality. But I do have some tight passes. When I start passing tight, the guys just like I can crush way bigger guys. So generally speaking, when you passing, so I guess we're talking about side to make sure you develop one dominant side, but the other side is not complete disaster. Fast, loose, or tight passing. Again, you want to make sure whatever is your preference, that the other one is not complete disaster. And then third one is, when you passing in your dominant way, make the pass. And if the guy gives you, as he's defending, and he gives you like switching to the other side, do it right away. But for example, if I like a knee cut pass, or leg pummeling, or just kind of kicking out.
Mm-hmm.
I will try 3 times, the ballpark on the same side before I switch.
Mm-hmm.
So in other words, this is the concept of before you're going to switch to the other side or to tight, make them fully commit to defending whatever you're throwing on them with your preferred passing. Then you switch to the other one, because now if you're throwing at them your dominant passing, sometimes they just overcommit right away. Then you just go. But if you're going against a skilled opponent, he will not overcommit. So make sure that you get a full commitment on your dominant passing before you switch it up, and then you switch to less dominant. So even though it's not as good, the guy is fully committed to that one side, or passing either defending you standing passing or defending you tight passing. Now you could switch it up. So even though it's not your dominant, you compensate for that by him being committed to your dominant passing.
That's excellent. That's excellent advice. I'm going to use that. Thank you. That's excellent.
Let me know how that works out.
I will. I'm going to. That's my biggest thing right now. I'm trying to get, for whatever reason, I feel like my guard passing went back to sucking for whatever reason, and I'm trying to improve it again. So I'm basically, I think it goes back to that thing where I'm working a lot of new concepts, so I'm dealing with new people, and so it's just learning new stuff. So I feel like
so sometimes it takes time to, even though you're doing them well, it's just maybe your rhythm is slightly off, maybe your timing is slightly off. It takes time to just kind of get it smooth,
Right. I'll let you know how it goes. I'll let you know. I'm going to develop something.
All right. Sounds good.
That's awesome. So, and again, from watching Roll with the Fox, I know that you train gi during the colder months and no gi during the warmer months. So you don't necessarily have a preference between the two. But in your opinion, what's the major differences between the two, and how can one complement the other? Gi and no gi.
So the major difference is speed and rhythm. Just primarily friction. I try to use, universal grips, both gi and no gi, so that there is no, so for example, if I'm doing an arm drag, I will grab the wrist, I like the armpit, with the gi. So I like to buy the armpits. It's very strong grip. So that's a little different. But usually I will hold the wrist as opposed to the sleeve. I will hold the Achilles versus the pants. But the big difference, and this is one of the reasons I recommend even guys that prefer, gi or no, to train no gi at least once a week, and guys that do no gi train with the gi at least once a week. Because usually, if you do no gi for 2 years, and then suddenly you got to wear gi, you're gonna feel like you're going into jiu-jitsu for the first time,
right? And
that's not a good feeling. So, but the more important reason is the gi has a different rhythm from no gi. No gi is a very, you can, the rhythm is much faster. The pace is much faster in no gi because you don't have this, the number one friction and the sleeve and pant grips that slow things down. So that's the major difference. And I'd recommend that everybody train both. I actually, the reality is I train a little bit of gi every week and no gi every week as well. But generally speaking, I like a faster paced game. So even with the gi, I just go, know, but if it's cold, I like to start out with the gi and then I switch to no gi.
So you'll do in the same session then?
Yeah, a lot of times I do half and half. But a lot of times, if it's hotter, if I travel, it's nicer to travel no gi because I could have a much smaller bag. It's much smaller bag.
Yeah, you don't have to bring your belt and everything, and your gi and everything. Yeah. Oh, that's great. So we already covered diet, that we don't diet, and we covered, How did you just so I think I remember the answer, but I think it'd be good for listeners to hear in case they have some of the same things. How did you come across the concept of using water as resistance training later to develop your Fluid BJJ?
I always loved water. Always ever since I was a kid, I always loved being into the water. And I remember there was a tournament in Colorado called Sabaki Challenge, Kyokushin Karate. It's an eight-man tournament, and it's Kyokushin is very, very tough. It's basically guys stand toe to toe, just wailing on each other.
I'm really familiar with it.
And you can kick to the body, you can't kick to the face. And one year there was a Japanese guy that won it, and basically he rarely trains with other people. He probably trains solo by himself, solo drills. So, you know, I would, like, when I was doing stand-up, when I was focusing on stand-up, if I had to travel, I would move furniture around in my room and do 1,000 kicks before I had to go to the meetings and stuff like that. So if I travel, and I'm thinking like, okay, solo drills work. And then I'm thinking like, what about if I do it in the water? Like, you know, yeah, you're going to look silly because people are going to think there's something wrong with you, but it's even better than, you know, especially for striking. It's quite simple. It makes you way faster. The resistance, you know, it's good for all the little injuries that you might have or little tweaks, and it's therapeutic. It's fast. It makes you faster. And then I just started. So I started primarily with this. I've been doing it for at least 20 years now, and I used to start out with striking at a YMCA in the city, and then you know, when I travel in the hotels, if I didn't have a training partner, I would go in the pool. And then I started playing around. Could I do jiu-jitsu? Right. And it turns out, yes, you can. So that's
that's interesting too, because, you know, I started my martial arts career with Shotokan and Shirinji karate. I did it for like a decade, and I started in junior high. And we lived in an HOA at the time, my mom and I, and we had a pool. And I remember doing that in the pool. I remember practicing my kicks, my strikes in the pool in the summertime. And I never thought about it, but you're right. The resistance, when I heard you talk about resistance before with that, I'm like, that really does work. The water gives you extra resistance, and it makes you faster with your kicks and your punches. Yeah, it really does. But I never tried it. Go ahead.
If you try with jiu-jitsu, it actually does make you fast. Like if I train, like there were times when I, you know, like when my back was not, I would like go, you know, I would train Sunday, Monday, Tuesday. Then Wednesday I'd go in, you know, do the competition class at Renzo's, then take John's class. I'd be just, you know, I'd do it for a few weeks, and you just start to wear down.
Right.
And I would go in the water for 4 days, and then you get on the mats, and like your game, you'll be amazed how fast and fluid, pardon the pun, your game is going to be.
No, I'm going to check it out, actually, because I still have access to a pool. So I'm going to check it out. I'm going to try it. I'm gonna do it.
Yeah, let me know. DM me if you have any questions, because the hardest part is, like, if you take a breath in and you try to engage jiu-jitsu, you're gonna float on the water because you're, you know, with the lungs filled up, you're gonna float. What you want to do is breathe out and continue to breathe out throughout the whole sequence. Okay, that's how you engage gravity. Takes a little while to get used to it, but once you do, like, sky's the limit. Like, you could practice an E-cut pass. You could practice, you know, flying arm, you know, a lot of times, you know, high risk techniques, flying arm bars, flying triangles. You can't, you know, if you do that 20 minutes on the mats, chances are one of you guys is going to get hurt. There was some really good black belt from Renzo's, Mario Delgado, and he's Renzo Gracie, Mexico. He commentates on UFC. And I saw him one time in Nogi Worlds. He hit a beautiful flying arm bar on a guy, and the guy tapped almost immediately. And because I was in his corner. And I'm like, man, that was beautiful, Mario. And he's like, yeah, you know why? And he didn't even partake in this because there was a Gracie camp in Cancun that I taught the Fluid BJJ. And he was watching it from the sidelines. And he said, I started playing with it in the water after I watched you do it.
Nice.
So it's good.
Have you ever done it with a partner in the water? Like training, like flying arm bars or whatever?
You know, for Cancun, and we had maybe too many beers. But I don't advise it, because here's the problem: you paying. One of the greatest benefits, which is highly underrated, is no matter what you do, if you do solo drills, have you ever practiced box or shadow box? Yeah. High level boxers, yes. Have you ever watched wrestlers practice their shots? Like just tune everything out. Practice. Yes. So why would jiu-jitsu be any different? How many times have you rarely see jiu-jitsu people do solo drills. Right. Extremely rarely, but it's an extremely valuable tool. Why? You can visualize. Once you start training, doing solo drills, I can actually, in the water, you can do stuff that you can't get away on the mats until you almost perfect it. So you never do it because it's a high possibility of injury, or, you're landing on your neck and crap. So you almost never see jiu-jitsu people do solo drills.
Mhm.
And I think it's a highly underrated because you visualize, and once you do it for a while, like in the water when I train and my movement is slightly off, I know exactly when it's off. If I'm going against a high level guy, I know exactly how he's going to react. I know exactly how he's going to react. And now I have to react to his reaction. So I can, it becomes interactive where I'm not necessarily focused on his intensity or his, I focus on my movement in response. I visualize how the sequence goes.
Nice. That's perfect. That's great.
So
people can reach you at silverfoxbjj.com. That's the great website I told everybody about. If you're interested in Karel's Jiu-Jitsu, you can check out Roll with the Fox on YouTube.
It's a Silver Fox BJJ channel. So
yeah,
everything is under Silver. If you Google Silver Fox BJJ, it will come up.
It's all there.
Will come
up.
Yeah.
Your Fluid. Yeah. The Roll with the Fox is on there. The Fluid BJJ, the Silver Fox with Firas Zahabi, which are really good videos as well. Those went up for a little while, but those are excellent videos. Excellent videos.
Yeah. I'm heading up on Thursday.
Awesome. We do another one.
Yeah.
Awesome.
Yeah.
I'll be all over that. I'm going to check that out as soon as it comes out. I love those videos. And then you're on Instagram at Silver Fox BJJ, and you're on Facebook at Silver Fox. And that's actually, you said was like it's like an athlete page and it's run by somebody else.
So I have on Instagram, on Facebook and Instagram, if you go to Silver Fox BJJ on either, and you get the logo, that's the school, that's the academy page.
Okay.
People help me with it because I'm just getting pulled in too many different directions.
Right.
There's a Silver Fox BJJ. If you just put Silver Fox, there's a picture of me in a blue gi.
Yeah.
That's my personal account. I'm maxed out on friends, but I will always answer questions that are sent to me on that page.
Okay.
And periodically, somebody drops out, so people can get in to become my friends. But I will always answer messages on that.
All right, great. And then you have a book, Fluid BJJ, Scrawny Middle-Aged Guy's Guide to Getting Submissions. That's available on Amazon on paperback, Amazon.com. I think that was like $18.
It's 5 years old. The concepts are still valid, but there's a lot more newer stuff on BJJ Fanatics.
Okay, yeah, I was going to get into that too.
Okay.
So you have your video. Fluid BJJ, Scrawny Middle-Aged Guide to Submissions is available for download on JiuJitsu.com. And you also have 4 instructionals on BJJ Fanatics. You have fundamental armbar mechanics, the split guard system, which I actually, if you'd like to come back on in the future, I'd love to talk to you about the split guard system. That interests me.
Absolutely.
And you have mastering the guillotine concepts and principles, and mastering the triangle, probably another favorite of mine. I got to check that one out as well.
Yeah, that one is highly underrated because there's literally 3.5 hours of footage. If you know my teaching style, I don't spend 20 minutes explaining one technique. I usually try to give you all the relevant most important aspects of that and move on. But literally I can triangle people from anywhere. It talks about regular triangles. You talk about regular triangles. There's probably, if you look at 10 different people how they do triangles, there is 10 different ways. Mine works for me. It's high. Once I lock it up, people don't escape.
Hey, the Silver Fox squeeze works. I know. I tried it and it works great. So yeah,
nice.
No, it's awesome. Yeah, put your knees together, bring your knees in. It's magic. It makes the hole so small and it's like taps right away.
But there's also the world of reverse triangles, inverted triangles, and ugly triangles. There's just so much you could do with it. And one of the biggest things that people don't pay attention to when they triangulate things, triangles give you a chance for simultaneous submission. So you don't have to let go of the triangle, and you can either attack, generally speaking, the arm that's either trapped or the arm that's outside the triangle, depending on the position that you're in. And that's a highly underrated feature of triangles. So anyways,
no, they're great. I think triangles are awesome. I want to get my hands on that instructional and study it. That's a fun concept for me. I like it. I
appreciate it.
Well, Karel, it was a pleasure to talk to you today. I really thank you for coming on. There's a high point, your episode Sweet 16, and it's been a great interview. So hopefully you'll come back on in the future and we can maybe get into some split guard or triangle discussions.
Yeah, I'd love to do that. Yeah, I appreciate it. Thank you. It was truly my pleasure.
All right. Thank you. All right. Have a great day. I'll talk to you soon.
You too.
All right.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Bye.